Everyone needs a good non-autonomous drone without altitude hold in their collection. Normally it's a brushed one, but this little speed demon is brushless. It's the MJX Bugs 3 Mini. Links to it are in the video description, and do take a look because this one is quite unique. Be sure to subscribe as well for more reviews like this. Enjoy the video.
So into us from Hobby Wow is this, and it's the MJX Bugs 3 Mini. I think it's also known as the B3. Now, this is not a camera drone, which is odd because the listing on the website actually says that it has a camera, but when you dig into the specification at the bottom, it actually mentions camera not included. So we're going to be reviewing this as a basic quadcopter essentially, but it is brushless. So this is not just going to be one of those boring toy grade ones. This should be quite interesting. Let's have a look inside the box, which by the way is very nice. And I do like packaging. People have moaned on this channel about why do we need to see the box? Well, actually seeing the box does interest people because you are buying these for gifts sometimes, and in which case you don't want it to appear cheap or crap. So we get an instruction manual, and part of that as well is also a guide as to what all the buttons and switches do on the transmitter, which is a nice idea because quite often transmitters are not labelled with what the controls do, and not everybody's used to a transmitter if you're new to drones, so that's quite a nice feature. Then we've got the transmitter underneath, and we'll have a look at that in more detail in a minute. And there is the little quad. So this is a really neat looking little quad. It actually reminds me massively of the Walkera Rodeo 110. Very similar build quality and feel to it. We'll have a look at that in more detail in a second. We've got a set of prop guards first of all. They're going to be useful if you're new to flying. We've got a USB charging cable. That's obviously for charging the battery that comes with it. And that's a balanced charger. We'll have a look at that again. Then there's the actual battery. That is a 2-cell 850 milliamp. So not a bad size battery. It's the same size, in fact, as the battery we had in the FQ777 that we reviewed a while ago. So that's probably going to give quite a good flight time actually, because it is a big battery for quite a small quad. Quite a bit of weight in that as well. And finally, we get a little spanner set and a screwdriver, and also, of course, some spare props. You only get 4 of those, but with the prop guards, hopefully you won't need them if you're flying this and you're new to drones. So that's what you get in the box. Let's have a closer look at the quad. So as mentioned, this one came from Hobby Wow. It's priced at about $85, which is around £80 with a translation. And that's quite expensive actually, although this is not necessarily a budget brand. Now there are lots of choice on the market at the moment in terms of cheaper non-camera drones. Also some have cameras like the E58, for example, or the Visuo 809. But this I think is designed more at the kind of the speed, the racing market. People who want to fly something a bit more exhilarating. Now it is a shame that it hasn't got a camera, but I've got some ideas around that, potentially with a little VTX all-in-one set like this, where you basically attach the camera onto the front. You get all-in-one units, so you don't need this extra bit here now, but you would literally strap the camera on there, and you can actually then fly this with some 5.8 gig racing drone type goggles. So that's an option, but anyway, no camera. On the front of this one, we just have a bright LED, unfortunately. So the construction of the quad is plastic and it feels very rigid. There is a little bit of flex on these arms, which is good because if you do crash, at least these arms aren't necessarily going to snap. But the construction is entirely plastic. It's quite a nice feeling plastic as well. As I said, this doesn't have a budget feel to it. It does feel like a decent made product. We've got brushless motors here. These are 1306 2750 kV motors. They are pretty small motors, but I think 27 kV is going to give us some fairly good good performance out of this because the quad itself is actually quite light. It weighs in at around 200 grams, and that's not bad for a quad of this size. Attached to those little brushless motors are 3.7-inch props, and as I said, you do get 4 spare props as well. Now the battery goes into the rear. One easy mistake to make is that they've put a little plastic or rubber protector over the terminals, so you need to take that off first before you then plug in the battery, because obviously the battery won't plug in. And I do think that might confuse a few noobs to drones because they wouldn't expect to see the terminals protected like that. So with that little protector removed from the contacts there, the battery does slide in pretty easily. Now the one thing I dislike about this is that as soon as you slide that battery in, the quad turns on. Now I'd much prefer there to be a power button on this quad. Unfortunately there isn't. So as soon as the battery's in, it's on. But if there's any benefit to that, at least you don't forget to turn it off, because you do need to just take the battery out. Getting the battery out isn't quite as easy as getting it in. You have to push this little button down here and then slide the whole battery out, and that can be quite fiddly, but yeah, you'll get there after a few attempts. So with the battery in, you can see we've also on the underside of this quad got some nice LED lights as well. They're really, really bright. There are some on the rear as well, and I think they'll probably illuminate once we bind this with the transmitter. There's also a very bright light on the front. That's going to look really, really good when we're flying this around. Now, one modification you could also make is to remove that LED on the front and install a camera in there, a 5.8 gig camera. That's an option because you've got a power supply going to that LED as well, which would probably be about right for a little all-in-one VTX and camera unit, but that's another option anyway if you fancy messing around with this. Finally, on the underside we've got some little landing feet as well. They are plastic. I suspect that they will snap off quite quickly, probably, so but it is nice that when you do sit the quad down, at least it sits on those. So that's the quad anyway. Overall, not too bad at all. Let's have a quick look now at the transmitter. So this is not an overly complex transmitter. On the back there is the battery port into which you install 4 AA batteries, which I've already done in advance. It doesn't come with any batteries, it's worth noting that. So starting at the top, we've got a button on top here which is for turning the lights of the drone on and off, nice feature. The lock button which stops and starts the prop, so in other words that's your kind of go button. Then we've got sensitivity low and high. It only has 2, unfortunately. I always like to see 3 because they're generally the 2 extents of low and high are not enough, but we will see. And we have a camera button, but of course this doesn't have a camera. It's unlikely that that's going to do anything. Then we've got our main gimbals, which actually feel quite nice. We've got a free roaming throttle here, so there's no spring ratchet on there, which is good. And then either side of the gimbals, we've got our trim switches, which you are probably used to seeing on most other transmitters. Then here, where the trim switch would be for the throttle, we've got a 2-position switch. Now, interestingly, this one has a angle mode, which basically auto rights the quad, and that's great for people who are not used to flying quadcopters. That means that it's going to basically stabilize the quad. It's not going to hold its position, but it's going to stop the quad from drifting at all like that. Then we've got Acro mode. They've actually called it Acro mode as well, which is what we call it in the quad racing world. And that basically means that if I tilt the quad forwards, it's going to carry on flying forwards until I tilt it manually back. So that's going to be really, really nice to play around with. Then we've got the on and off button, which is quite self-explanatory. And when we turn the transmitter on, we've got this nice red glow at the top. Finally, on the rear, there are also 2 buttons, shoulder buttons. Unfortunately, only one of them's functional, which is L1, and that is a flip or stunt mode. So I'm guessing that's going to prompt it to do a 360-degree flip or something like that, but we'll have a look at that during the test flight. So that's the transmitter with its 2 antennas on top. Not sure if these are actually functional. The range is said to be 200 or 300 meters, so perhaps these are functional after all, because to get that kind of range out of a 2.4 gig cheap set like this, probably are going to need 2 antennas. We will see. Anyway, let's get on to the flight test.
So So it actually just started snowing here in the UK. We've already had a big bout of snow and we've just had some more. But I'm here for the flight test today with the Bugs Mini brushless quadcopter. Now remember, this one doesn't have a camera, so it won't be the most exciting flight test, but I've got an idea and we'll have a look at that after we see how it flies. So remember, this doesn't have an on and off button, which is a bit annoying, but let's get the transmitter set up. Like that. These don't rotate around. Okay, they go the wrong way. Oh well. Not ideal. So we're in normal mode at the moment, which is like stabilised mode, essentially, horizon mode. Transmitter's on. Going to turn on the quad by pushing in the battery, because remember, this doesn't have an on and off switch, which is a shame. Got my trusty landy mat. I love that with me. If you want one of these, have a look in the video description for a link. So let's put our quad on there like that. Really does remind me of the Walkera Rodeo 150, just very similar in size and feel. So you're going to press unlock, that starts the props going, and up we go. Now, I'm used to flying brushed non-camera quads just for fun, but this thing is super smooth because of course it's brushless. It's much quieter as well, and yeah, I mean, it's very windy today, but that is flying very well. And in terms of training quads, this is a really good one because you're going to get hopefully a good flight time, which we'll have a look at the end of the flight test. And in general, it's just going to be nice and responsive. Now we're in normal sensitivity at the moment. Let's just have a quick fly around. Now for normal sensitivity, that's still really fast. Now the light on the front is really good because it helps you to orientate it. Now the only problem with this one, not necessarily a problem, but it doesn't have altitude hold. And because of that, if you drop the throttle completely, it will drop out of the sky. So you just have to remember when you're flying it that this is a proper quadcopter. You know, it's not one that's got loads of autonomous aids. So you really are going to have to fly this, but it's quick. This is normal sensitivity mode. We are being carried by the wind a little bit here, but that's flying really, really well. So I would say, you know, quads like the Visuo 809 and the Eachine E58, they are definitely training quads. However, this is a different level because it is, it's not going to help you particularly. And as I say, if you drop the throttle like this, there, you see it loses stability because it hasn't got essentially air mode. It hasn't got altitude hold. Let's just do that again. There. As soon as you up the throttle again, of course, it stabilizes itself, but by that point, you may have already crashed it. But this thing is fast, really fast, and it's just cutting through this wind with no problem at all. Really quick. Great fun, absolutely brilliant fun. So if you're not a beginner, this is definitely going to be a lot of fun. But if you are a beginner, then this is not really for you. But actually, you know, the price tag of this, it's not cheap, but perhaps I can see why. I mean, it's really well made, it's beautifully balanced, flies brilliantly, and it looks quite nice in the air as well, especially with that light on the front as well. And it's just cutting through this wind, it's really not causing it a big issue. Now, we do have a stunt button. Ah, there we go. So on the back of the transmitter, you press the rear shoulder button, press the direction, and it will then, God, wind is really carrying it. Press the button, and it then does a flip. Yay, so let's do a front one as well. Nice, let's see if we can fly along and do one as we're moving. This could go horribly wrong. Let's see, here we go, here we go. Yeah, we did it. Okay, let's do that again, try and be a bit closer. Here we go, and yay! Very cool. Now, as I mentioned, this hasn't got a camera, but I've got an idea, and I'm not sure the flight time we're going to get with this, so I'm going to land it. Actually, before we mess around with cameras, I'm just going to try the Acro mode. So to change mode on this, you have to turn everything off first, change the mode switch, turn that on, and then connect power to the quad again. So This time we're in Acro mode. This will be quite interesting. So in other words, we've got no natural stability. So we are entirely on our own now. This could be this could be messy. So, oh wow, yeah. Okay, so now this basically feels like a quadcopter, a racing quad, where you are in full Acro mode. Oh, yep, okay. And that is much, much harder to fly. I don't like flying Acro mode, line of sight, even with a racing quad. So it's even more unpleasant. Basically, in summary, there is a version of this with a camera. That's what this mode is for, because flying it line of sight in this mode is just pretty unpleasant. So that's Acro mode. I'm gonna land it, because that's horrible, and we're gonna mess around with a camera. So what I've got is a RunCam 2, which I'm gonna turn on. And my plan here is that I'm gonna strap it to the underside of this quad. And that, of course, captures pretty good quality video. So we're just going to see what the video looks like and then tighten that up. I'm going to move it a little bit towards the front as well. But there we go. So that's nice and tight on there. Okay. I can't explain how cold it is here. It is really, really chilly. But the things we do, hey, for you guys. There we go. Start the props. And up we go. So hopefully you are now seeing footage from that onboard camera. So I'll try and fly a little bit more smoothly. Although it will be a little bit difficult in this wind. But hopefully that's looking quite nice. Now obviously with the additional weight of that camera, the quad isn't flying quite as agile, but actually that's quite nice in a way. Wow, now downwind. Now the transmitter's actually beeping at me. I think the lights on the quad are also flashing to tell us that the battery is going flat. That's really frustrating actually, because I wanted to get some more video, but it looks like we might have to bring it into land. So, but hopefully this has been a nice little experiment, and I've really enjoyed flying this. So the flight time seems to be perhaps about 5 minutes or so. Not particularly long, not as long as I'd hoped, but not too bad. So let's bring it in now to land, but hopefully that video test was good. Let's bring it in nice and smoothly. And yeah, the lights on the quad are flashing to indicate battery low, as you can see. But hopefully that video looks good. So let's bring it into land. And there we go. Lovely. So in summary, this little Bugs quad is a really nice one. It's not for beginners. I would say definitely not for beginners. But if you've got LOS experience and you're used to flying line of sight and you want to go one step further to something a bit more advanced, then this is definitely a good quad for that. It's not necessarily cheap. It is about £80, I think $80, I think I said. But then, you know, it's brushless, it's really, really nicely built. It's quite crash resistant, I would say, as well. And as you can see, it just lifted a RunCam 2. So if you did want to do some video work, it's capable of lifting some additional weight. But yeah, I'll put some positives and negatives up on the screen now. If you're interested in having a look at this quad, links to it are in the video description. And of course, comment below with your thoughts, and please subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, because we'll have a giveaway coming up very soon. Thanks very much for watching.